Welcome back. How's your project coming along? In this lesson, it's going to be an interesting one because we're going to be creating an element using JavaScript. So let's first start out by adding another event listener. And this event listener is going to listen for the DOM content to load. And this is the same as with jQuery when you're listening for document ready, making sure that the DOM has loaded. And once the DOM content has loaded, then we can invoke the function in order to create our moving target. And I do say moving, and we're going to introduce the moving part of it in the upcoming lesson. So let's first create that target. So refresh, and we don't see anything happening here because we don't have any code here. But trust me when I tell you that this is actually loading, and all of the block of code that's going to be in here is going to get rendered out once the DOM content has loaded. And usually that's fairly instant, and especially because I'm on my local machine, right on my computer, we're not going to have any lag with the DOM content loading, of course. I wanted to create another element here, so I'm going to give it a class of box and apply all of this, including creating the element on the fly using JavaScript, create the position, setting the position as relative, which is going to give me the ability to move it around. I'm going to set its left position as 50%. I'm going to set its top position as 50%. And we're going to move it around with JavaScript, setting up a width and a height. So how about we do 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. And the objective of this exercise in this game is going to be to try to catch this moving object. Also set up a border radius so that it's slightly rounded, 15 pixels rounded. So now we've got an element with the box. Next, we need to create it and we need to add it to the page. And this is always one of the fun things of JavaScript because you get to create stuff that for the user to see and customize, create it using JavaScript. So first of all, let's create a div. You can use a variable called div, creating whatever you want it to call it, but in this case, we're calling it div. Do create element, allows us to create elements on the fly. And in this case, we're creating a div. And because this is an object, we have the ability to update some of the values that are contained within there. We can update the class list by using class, add, and adding in that box class that we created. And we also want to append it so that it appends to the visible area, because right now we can't see it, even though we've created it. So append this div to the output element. And we do need to add a background color or a border so that we can see it. So let's just add a quick border around it so that we can actually see it, because it is adding it. And if you don't trust me, then we can always add a border and you can see it showing up on the page. So there it is. It's being added in the same spot all the time. Let's apply some properties to it. And again, because it is an object, that gives us the ability to add different object values. So we can add in an X and a Y value, which we can then use in order to adjust and manipulate its position. So I usually like to create these as separate values, which makes it a little bit easier to move them around. So taking our div object that we created, adding in an object value of X, we're going to take that div, get the offset, and also taking div Y, and this is another new value that we're creating. And here we're offsetting the top position. So it's going to give us a left and right position. And you can also console log out that value of div so that you can see that. And of course, it's we have to do console directory and able to see the actual object properties and values. So if we open that up and if we go right to the bottom, we're going to see that we've added in this X and Y object value. So those aren't there by default, and we're adding those in so that we can utilize them in the upcoming lesson as we move this element around. So starting position of X and Y is coming in at 259 and 277, and it's getting positioned on the page. We can also update its background color if we want, and I'll show you how to do that. Adding an event listener, whenever we hover over it, we'll update that background image. So for now, how about we create a default background color? So this can be temp color. And let's do this at random. So we're creating a hex value, and we know that colors are hex values. Using math random in JavaScript is going to give us the ability to have a random value. We're going to change this value to string with a base of 16. So that's going to give us our hex value, and then substring returning back the last 6 characters of our hex value, which is going to give us a temporary background color. And lastly, let's apply that background color. So just as we did with before, where we're setting a background color, we've got our temp color available for that element. So let's see what happens now. And now when I refresh it, so every time I refresh it, our box is actually going to have a different color. So that's pretty neat. And we're ready to move on to the next step, where we can introduce some interactivity to that element. So whenever we hover over this one, let's change the color to red. So make that more interesting and make it more of a game where you have to move your mouse cursor over this ever moving element object. So that is all still yet to come. So for now, create the add event listener for whenever the DOM content has loaded. Create an element. So using create element method in JavaScript, create this element. Add the class of box, and you can apply your own styling to box, or you can use the one that I've provided. As well, then append it to the output element. So that's the same output element that we've been using here as an object. Create a couple different values. So we've got an X and a Y. So these are going to be the starting coordinates, and we can adjust those using our JavaScript, and that's going to come on the upcoming lessons. And then also create a random color. So this is a really nice short format where we use random math random. We convert it into a hex value, and then we take the last 6 characters of it in order to produce a random color value. And then set the background color value to that random color value that we've created, and you're ready to move on to the next step.